A little before midnight on a summer night of 1982, a man was hit by a vehicle in Northeast Ohio. Although a post-mortem photo of him was circulated locally along with a description of his tattoo and clothing, no one seemed to know who he was in life. His identity wouldn't be uncovered until an investigator decided to take another look at his case in 2022 because he was sure technology had advanced enough to where they could finally identify this man. And he was right. Now, the majority of Jane and John Doe cases featured in videos and articles online focus on individuals whose lives were intentionally taken. These stories often center on violence, crime, and unanswered questions surrounding homicide. However, there are many lesser-known cases in which a person dies as a result of an accident, yet still meets the same fate, remaining unidentified for decades. Though no intentional foul play was involved, these individuals are often just as forgotten, and their stories can be just as haunting. This is one of those cases. About 10 minutes before midnight on August 12th of 1982, the quiet stretch of Western Reserve Road in Youngstown, Ohio, turned deadly. As a man walked westward just beyond the intersection with State Route 7, the darkness was shattered by the sudden approach of a car traveling in the same direction. In a matter of seconds, the lonely roadside became the scene of a fatal collision that would leave more questions than answers in its wake. According to the coroner's report, the man's death was a result of a collision with a vehicle driven by an 18-year-old woman from Canfield, a city in Ohio about 10 miles southwest of Youngstown. The impact was so severe that his body was hurled 54 feet from the point of contact, disappearing into the darkness along the roadside. The driver would state that she saw another vehicle pass her in the opposite direction, and then she felt as if she had hit something. There was no doubt in her mind that she had hit something. After the collision, the woman pulled off the road into a parking lot at 1255 Western Reserve Road near the Youngstown Racquet Club. Shaken, she told a friend who had been following her that she believed she had struck something. Together, the two returned to the area where the incident had occurred, scanning the pavement and shoulders for any sign of what she might have hit. They found nothing. Exactly what happened that night is uncertain because stories differ. What we do know is that a man's body was found in a ditch on Western Reserve Road, with the Mahoning County Coroner's investigator being notified of the finding at 12:20 a.m., about a half an hour after the man was hit. The man was Caucasian. Original reports state he was believed to have been about 35 years old at the time he died, stood at about 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed approximately 140 pounds. He had brunette hair, hazel eyes, and had a full beard and mustache. He was wearing a gray long-sleeve sweater, green corduroy pants, and green socks. I couldn't find any information on whether he was wearing any shoes. When it comes to distinctive physical characteristics, he had a cross-shaped tattoo located on the back of his right forearm. According to the coroner's report, the cause of death was determined to be shock and hemorrhage resulting from the multiple fractures to the extremities, along with possible internal injuries. The severity of the trauma indicated that the injuries led to rapid blood loss and a fatal physiological response. Toxicology testing conducted as part of the autopsy found no evidence of drugs or alcohol in the man's system at the time of his death, which of course ruled out impairment as a contributing factor to him being hit. There was one unfortunate aspect about this man though, and that was that he had no forms of identification on him. For that reason, he was classified as a John Doe and would eventually be given the name Western Reserve Road John Doe. As many of us already know, most often when it comes to Jane and John Does, they are given names that have to do with either a physical characteristic of theirs, maybe their clothing or hair, or something about them that sets them apart from others, or a lot of the time they are given a name that has to do with the area where they were found. This John Doe was hit and took his last breath on Western Reserve Road, so they found this name fitting. It was noted that the following day, when news spread of a hit-skip accident in the same area, the young woman realized the incident might be connected to what she had experienced the night before. Confronted with that possibility, she contacted an attorney. Together, they drove to the Canfield post of the Ohio State Highway Patrol, where she agreed to be interviewed, setting in motion the next phase of the investigation into the fatal collision. The young woman, despite what papers said, claimed that she hadn't just left the scene. She said that she did stop, that she and her friend had looked for whatever she might have hit, that they did notify Boardman police, and that an officer helped them look and, after not finding anything, told them that they were good to go. It is stated in online sources that this officer continued looking, even brought in backup, and eventually found the man. The issue was, though, that the next day, when she went to turn herself in, no one from the Boardman police or the Ohio State Highway Patrol could verify her story. It remains completely unclear whether the woman was ever formally charged in connection with the incident. At the time, the Vindicator, a local newspaper, reported that prosecutors were still weighing whether to pursue criminal charges, carefully reviewing the circumstances and available evidence. Beyond that brief mention, however, no further details surfaced. His death today, even after identification, is still listed as vehicular homicide. Reports state that investigators collected samples of hair, blood, and clothing from the scene and would later send them to the Ohio State Highway Patrol Laboratory in Columbus for analysis, hoping the evidence would clarify what had happened on Western Reserve Road that night. At the same time, the coroner's report stated that efforts were underway to identify the victim through fingerprint analysis. Those results, however, were still pending at the time of the report, and despite the work of investigators, no match was ever made. In the end, the forensic testing and fingerprint checks failed to put a name to the man, deepening the mystery surrounding his death and leaving his identity unresolved. As Cleveland 19 stated, the case soon went cold, despite local press coverage and the existence of a distinctive tattoo. Now, this is one of those instances where a post-mortem photo of the doe was released to the public and spread around in newspapers, hoping that someone would recognize him. Here on my channel, though, I do not include post-mortem photos in my videos. YouTube doesn't like it, and I want to be respectful to the victim, but that photo is online when you look into this case, so do be aware of that. Still, though, despite his photo being spread around the area and a lot of people knowing what he looked like in death, no one came forward with a positive identification. Also, from my research, I couldn't locate any information on whether he had any recent interactions with any locals, if anyone had given him a ride, or if anyone else had even seen him walking that road that night. Another aspect of this story is that night, the Canfield Fair was going on only a few miles away from where he was hit. Had he possibly attended the fair that night? We don't know. After authorities were unable to identify him, he was laid to rest in Calvary Cemetery in Youngstown. There, the case faded into obscurity, remaining unsolved and untouched for roughly 4 decades. Sheriff's investigator James Ciotti with the Mahoning County Sheriff's Office reopened the case in May 2022, reviving an investigation that had long gone cold. Ciotti, a seasoned investigator, joined the Mahoning County Sheriff's Office in 2020. So only 2 years into his work there did he decide to reopen this long-forgotten investigation. One of the major obstacles he faced was the lack of surviving documentation. As WKBN News states, the Ohio State Highway Patrol, which had assumed control of the case from the Boardman Police Department, had purged its investigative records 7 years after the man's death in accordance with retention policies. As a result, much of the original evidence, reports, and leads were no longer available, leaving Ciotti to start the investigation with almost no existing material to guide his work, which I'm sure we can all assume was extremely frustrating. From what I could find online, it seems he had the coroner's report and, of course, articles released by local papers. I'm not entirely sure exactly what he had to work with besides that, but it was very little. Like I said, he started focusing on this case in 2022, and after he reopened it, he received a tip through NamUs that the man may be a missing man out of Denton, Texas, named Gary Wayne Dover. Gary was last seen on August 29th of 1981, and a few days after he went missing, his vehicle was actually found in a grocery store parking lot with the keys still inside. Investigators were hopeful that Gary could be their John Doe, and when you compare the postmortem photo of Western Reserve John Doe and a photo of Gary Wayne Dover, they do look a lot alike. About the photo of the John Doe, Gary's niece, Melanie Porter, stated, "Literally looks exactly like the picture of him living that they had to compare it to. Literally looks like the exact same person." DNA was not kept and stored from the John Doe, though, back in 1982, so they knew that they needed to exhume his remains. The John Doe's body had been buried by Fox Funeral Home and the Diocese of Youngstown as a charity burial. Ciotti had to reach out to them to get permission, and of course they wanted to make sure this was being done in the most respectful way possible, but they were all on board. On July 25th of 2023, the remains of the individual known as Western Reserve Road John Doe were exhumed. Everyone involved in the process was genuinely surprised by the condition of the remains. Despite having been buried in a wooden box in an area prone to water exposure, they were in remarkably good condition. From there, the skeletal remains were sent to the state BCI lab in Richfield for DNA testing.
The way we do investigations have changed. And subsequently, things that we didn't have available to us, DNA, genetic genealogy, has all become very important in solving modern day cases. So subsequently, that's what we're doing today, is trying to link that person.
Krista Blasco is the director of cemeteries. When she heard about the case, she knew they needed to do something.
And thought if we could help in any way, then we're absolutely going to step up. As long as everybody is safe, then let's do it and see what we can find.
A DNA test done soon after would determine that Western Reserve Road John Doe was not Gary Wayne Dover, which, one, at least crossed that possibility off the list, but two, unfortunately, left Gary's family still without any answers.
Could DNA be the key to solving this case?
I believe it is, yes. I think it's the only thing that will solve the case at this point in time.
Investigators are not giving up on identifying this John Doe. They'll be uploading his DNA sample to several genealogy websites in hopes of making a match through his family.
They already had the Doe's DNA, and now it was time to focus on genetic genealogy. The Mahoning County Sheriff's Office from there referred the case to the DNA Doe Project. The DNA Doe Project, as many of us already know, is an organization renowned for its team of expert investigative genetic genealogists who volunteer their skills to help identify unidentified individuals, commonly known as John and Jane Does. Working entirely pro bono, these specialists apply cutting-edge DNA analysis and genealogical research to provide crucial leads in cases that might otherwise remain unsolved. Supporting this effort, the Porchlight Project, a dedicated Ohio-based nonprofit focused on resolving cold cases, generously covered the costs associated with laboratory testing and database uploads, ensuring that the investigation had the necessary resources to move forward. As stated by WKBN, Ciotti worked the case with Youngstown Police Detective Sergeant Dave Sweeney, who has spearheaded that department's initiative into solving missing persons cases. Also helping was the State Bureau of Criminal Identification, the BCI Lab, Eric Hendershot of the Doe Project, and Val Bogart of the Porchlight Project. The unidentified man's DNA was initially uploaded to GEDmatch. GEDmatch, if you're unfamiliar, is an online genetic genealogy platform where people can upload their DNA data, usually from consumer testing services like Ancestry DNA or 23andMe, to find potential relatives and explore their ancestry. Uploading his DNA onto GEDmatch revealed only distant relatives, but suggested recent European, specifically Irish, ancestry. When his profile was later added to Family Tree DNA, that's when a closer match was located. This match was a woman sharing nearly 2% of her DNA with Western Reserve Road John Doe. This connection helped the team trace his lineage back to a man born in Ireland in 1836, identified as a likely ancestor of this John Doe. They took this one ancestor from Ireland and they built out all of his descendants. They found out that some of these descendants had moved to Massachusetts, and this part of the family was looking like it could be getting them close to who their John Doe was in life. Then they came across a man in the tree that looked like it could be their John Doe. This man had been born in Waltham, Massachusetts in 1941, grew up in Boston, moved to Los Angeles. There were quite a lot of records and evidence of his life while in LA during the 1960s, but then it was like he completely vanished. They couldn't discover in current time whether he was alive or dead. They presented all of this information to the sheriff's office and showed them how this man did have a niece, though, who was still alive. They believed that this niece could be the puzzle piece to finally solve this long-running mystery. The Mahoning County Sheriff's Office got in contact with this niece, Natalie Bowerly of Florida, and a DNA sample from her was obtained. Her DNA was compared to the DNA of Western Reserve Road John Doe, and it showed relation. It was a lengthy process. He was identified back in fall of 2025, but the official news of his identification with his name was publicly released just this month. On January 6th of 2026, it was released that in life, Western Reserve Road John Doe was Charles Joseph Nunnenman III. He was 41 when his life ended. Charles's niece stated that she was told that her uncle had died before she was born, but her mother, who had passed away in 2020, had always asked her to try to help her find out what had happened to him. The two of them had lost contact when Natalie's mother got married at 18 years old and moved away to Indiana. Natalie said, though, that her mother asked her for years to help her find out what happened to Charles, but Natalie was never able to find anything. She said that she has no clue what he would have been doing in Ohio, but she said that this is kind of like closure for her mother, who never got any. Charles lost his life that summer night of 1982. What happened to him is known. Although some people believe that the person responsible should have faced some consequences, many believe too much time has passed and it was nothing but an unfortunate accident. What we do have to focus on is that, unfortunately, his sister never got the closure that she wanted while she was alive, but his family, his remaining loved ones, do know what happened to him all those years ago. I do have to say, though, that Gary Wayne Dover, the man thought at one time to be him, is still missing today. If you have any information regarding his disappearance, you are urged to contact the Denton Police Department at 940-349-8181. I know that this doe was identified at the end of last year, but the fact that it was only a few days into the new year and we already heard of another doe being identified is a sure sign that this year, just like last year and the year before, we are going to be seeing so many more does getting their names back. If there are any doe cases that are kind of pet cases for you and you really want to see them be identified this year or next year or anytime soon because it's been long enough, definitely leave those cases down below. I'm always interested in hearing about the cases that you all, my viewers, are drawn to. If there are any other cases that you possibly want me to cover here on my channel, make sure to send this request over to gabulosiscaserequests@gmail.com. I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day wherever you are, and if you are in one of the states that just had the snowstorm, I hope that you stay very warm, and I also hope that you are a better prepper for snowstorms than I am, because I went grocery shopping and forgot eggs and milk. But if you are a viewer of mine and you enjoy my content and you're not already subscribed, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, because I would love in the next few months to maybe hit 200,000 subscribers. This has been a goal of mine for about 5 years now. But thank you all for watching another video, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.